Thanks for watching our first in a series of live discussions dedicated to destigmatizing mental health in the hospitality industry. We'll be talking to chefs across all sectors over the next few weeks to discuss their own experiences honestly and highlight ways we can all help to shout about mental health and hopefully make a positive impact in the future. I'll introduce myself first. Alice and Chris, you can show yourselves whilst I do my intro, and then we'll introduce ourselves separately. But so I'm Cara, I'm the editor of the Staff Canteen. I'm lucky to have a close relationship with a lot of people in the industry, and the impact of the past 7 months has been huge. It's really hard to keep picking yourself up every day, and it's something that this industry is very, very good at. Before I introduce the others, I'd just like to say on a huge positive thank you to everyone who has got on board with our first awards. If you haven't seen our awards as of yet, please do go look at our website and take a look at the nominees and vote for your favourites. It's just so good to be celebrating everyone, and we're really glad it's providing a small distraction from curfews and restrictions and the dreaded coronavirus, so that's lovely. So on to my guests. Chris Hill is the founder of the Burnt Chef Project, and he will be joining me and a different guest each week as part of this series. So Chris, do you want to tell us briefly about yourself and your relationship with hospitality?
Yes, certainly. So my name is Chris Hall. I'm the founder of the Burnt Chef Project, which is a clothing brand and awareness campaign to destigmatize mental health within hospitality worldwide, not just within the UK. And it was born about sort of a year and a half ago, really to start challenging people's perceptions of mental health, mental illness within hospitality, and to normalize the conversation, basically.
Perfect. And joining us today is Alice Bowyer, executive chef at Butcombe Brewery. I can never get those two words out in one go. Why did you want to take part in this series, and just talk about specifically what you want to kind of address?
Yeah, sure. Hello. So I'm from Butcombe Brewery, also part of the Liberation Group, and we're based across the Southwest and the Channel Islands. So we've got a really cool, far outreaching pub company, and I think that one of the benefits to that is getting involved with Burnt Chef Project. Is I feel quite sort of privileged that I have an opportunity to send the message out quite far and wide, and hopefully affect some real change. And I think talking about mental health in our industry is so important, and I think this series, as part of that, hopefully can help some people, and hopefully some organisations out there can take note and see if we can affect some real change.
Yeah, because you said obviously it's really important for you about kind of pubs, and you really want to address that, don't you? So
yeah, absolutely. I think certainly from a pub company point of view, and I know we just briefly discussed it before this call, that the fine dining industry probably shouts quite loud about chef mental health, but I think we mustn't forget that millions of chefs that work in pubs, and that comes with its own challenges. Certainly, it's slightly more corporate. We take pride in some of the training we do in terms of business, but that can add other pressure. Staff shortages is a real issue, which can add pressure onto people. So there's loads of different challenges, I think, specific to pub company environment that is good to talk about, hopefully today.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, before we get more into that, I've got a few kind of questions that ease you in a bit, Alice. So I really want to know, what did you know about mental health growing up? Because we talk about it as adults now, and our careers, and how it affects us. But were you aware of mental health as you were growing up? Was it something that you knew anything about?
Not really. I think, without showing my age too much, I think when I was growing up, I think probably the word depression had a quite negative stigma attached to it. It was definitely seen as a real weakness. I think certainly was growing up, and definitely in the early part of my career in hospitality, it definitely was. So no, I wouldn't have said we were ever discussed the word mental health at all when I was growing up.
Yeah, Chris, is that something you kind of agree with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only really us, only in the last sort of 2 or 3 years that mental health as a subject has become more prevalent within, well, the UK. up until that point, multiple industries sort of glossed over it because it was nothing that was ever discussed or was ever educated on. And I mean, certainly from our perspective, I mean, we've only been going since 2019, and we've seen a huge increase in the pace in which mental health is being discussed. And the Liberation Group and Butcombe are really at the forefront of exposing the message and really getting behind this conversation with regards to mental health, certainly during COVID as well, when staff were furloughed.
Okay, and
yeah, very much so. I think. Sorry, Cara.
Let's carry on.
I was just going to say, I think it is very recent that this conversation has come up, and that's probably due to the fact that the industry was about to collapse. So I think it can only go on so long with staff shortages, people not joining the industry, and it almost getting to a point of saturation where we're cracking. So I think recently it's been forced to come to the forefront, and we have to talk about it because it's a real core, deep-rooted issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting to a friend of mine, so Pete, he'll be on one of the later sessions as well, and we were just sort of openly discussing, this event and what we're looking to get out of it and the message that we're trying to convey to people. And during the conversation, we sort of conveyed, back when he was trained to be a chef 20 or so years ago, there was no conversation about mental health, and it was almost shown as a badge of honor to actually keep powering through. If you were very mentally unwell, if you had a severe mental illness, it was better to keep powering through and show that you could keep fighting until the point where you broke down or you had burnout or unfortunately in some cases suicide. And it was a case of he was a good chef and it got him too soon. I don't understand at what point within this industry that became such a normal phrase to use, as if to say, they had a good fight and they tried their best but they failed. And it's like, no, not at all. Like, mental health is something that it's an epidemic within this industry specifically, as well as nationwide. But in this industry, and our studies show that 4 out of 5 of a recent survey that we did said people had suffered from at least one issue of mental health within their career. And I just think we need to just change that whole thing and look at it more as unacceptable that people are suffering from mental health illnesses as a result of working within quite a demanding trade.
Yeah, and Alice, do you have a personal experience of mental health that you would like to share, either yourself or or someone that you've had the opportunity to see that happening?
Sure, and I think two things really. From my own point of view, I've always been absolutely useless at spotting it at the time, and it's not until years afterwards I can look back and realise that probably I was struggling, because I often used going to work as an escape for any issues that I had, and I used to get head right stuck into work all the hours, and I used that as a distraction technique, certainly when I was younger. I think my experiences, I suppose, as a female chef in particular, most female chefs were put on pastry, and they were told to sort of stay there. They weren't really seen as working in any that was deemed, a grill or anything else like that. So I always felt that you had to work a little bit harder, certainly to be heard and seen. I think fear was probably quite debilitating for me as a young chef, because I was a bit sensitive and didn't really take well to the kind of more sort of, macho way of being told what to do. And it was kind of belittling at times. So I used to find that quite difficult. But then I guess as I got older and felt more confident and experienced, I got more confident to speak up. But I think most of the mental health issues I have seen is probably more as an exec chef. And unfortunately, I have seen multiple chefs over the last 8 years of my career leave and resign without me realising there was an issue at all. And I think a lot of my chefs now have a certain point to want to try and please me when I go into the kitchen and they say everything's okay, and we've not picked up on that there was an issue. They didn't feel they could talk about it. Some of those chefs have even left the industry completely and gone to do something else. And that's been a common thing over the last few years. And yeah, one particular thing I wanted to point out actually was quite recent, only sort of 18 months ago. A female chef left the company, and I hadn't realised there was an issue where we had just had a bit too much male banter in the kitchen, and it was a bit much for her, and she resigned before our support network had a chance to speak to her and felt that she could speak up. And it was yet another reminder that we had still work to do in trying to create a culture in our kitchens that feel that people could talk up. So yeah, unfortunately, hundreds of experiences I've had with chefs that have left or really struggled, and I think we just try and learn from that. And me and my team certainly, I think when a chef is not performing, the first question we always ask is why, and maybe there's something going on in their life is the reason why something's wrong, and we always do that now first. And I think in the years gone by, the first thing would have been a telling off or something quite firm, and really the first question should be over a coffee: how is everything? How are you doing? So that's just what I suppose one thing that we're trying to do to help improve it. But yeah, genuinely hundreds of things I've seen, and a lot of stuff with booze and drugs, chefs just not looking after themselves and just spiraling. And it's so common. I could be here all day talking about it, honestly.
Yeah, which is really quite sad to hear, isn't it, that it is so common. And there'll be a lot of people listening to this that can relate to all of the things that you're saying as well. So I mean, how does it make you feel as someone who is a manager who's this is your team that you're looking after, to as recent, like you said, a recent experience where someone has left because of you've just not realized that they're uncomfortable. It must be quite hard for you to deal with that as a manager as yourself. Yeah,
devastating, honestly. It still haunts me now, honestly. It's just, particularly as a female chef as well, it's just absolutely awful. And we fight so hard and work so hard to really instill a culture that is friendly, welcoming, and gender balanced kitchens as well. I find in my experience are just more diverse kitchens, are just better, more creative, happier kitchens. And so to know that we've sort of a couple of members of our team have made someone feel unwelcome, it just absolutely kills me. But all we can do is just try and learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
I think that's an important point that you've mentioned there, Alice, is that some people will turn a blind eye to that for years to come, and the retention rates will suffer and the profitability of the company will suffer, but most importantly the health, both mentally and physically, of the people that work for them will also take a huge impact. So the fact that rather than just turn a blind eye and just accept that that's hospitality, as we have done for sort of 40-50 years, it's a case that actually you guys are now leading the charge and going, we've identified that that's a problem, we know that that's not right, and here we are fixing it, and that should be commended.
Yeah, I just feels like the right thing to do. I think you're absolutely right, Chris. For years and years, the only thing is exactly that, the blind eye. And as I said, I think it's always been seen as a weakness, that you were not okay or that you were struggling, and that you were dismissed, really. Well, they're not up to it, they can't do the job, they can't handle the workload. But actually, as I said before, I'm quite in a privileged position to maybe try and help change that for hundreds of different chefs, so that hopefully we can change that mindset. I think that's probably the main message there.
Yeah, good.
Definitely. And so with that in mind, what would you like to see happen more? Or there are changes already, people are trying to change, we are aware of that, we just need more of it, and that's why we wanted to do this series. We want to highlight it. So this is a kind of question for both of you. What small steps can people put in place if they maybe haven't already got them? What advice would you give kind of to try and help push this all forward and make it a more open and honest conversation?
Did you want to lead, Alice?
Yeah, sure. I suppose a million things. I don't think it's one thing. I think certainly just the very basics of listening and showing empathy, having a coffee, regular coffees. You know, when I say a coffee, you know, a regular one-to-one chat. I think looking at the workload, certainly that's something I'm very conscious of when we sort of discuss how particularly our head chefs should work and what constitutes their working week. Can we manage their workload better so that, you know, they don't feel like they're swamped with work and they can't achieve what they need to in a sort of 48-hour working week. I think that's the very basics. And then beyond that, I think probably the main thing is upskilling staff and training. Because I think, again, a very basic thing is chefs like to know what their job description is, what's expected of them, and that they feel like they've got a career path, that they feel like they've got the tools they need to do their job. And I think that goes a huge way in making sure that they're more content and not feeling so stressed at work. But that's just a few.
Yeah.
I think
some more.
Yeah. No. I mean, to be fair, I think you summarised some of the main points perfectly. I mean, one of the things that seems to be forgotten about in this industry, I think, because of the fast-paced nature of being in hospitality, is that one-to-ones are a thing that are a rarity, I would say, in this industry. You know, you've got people progressing throughout hospitality rather quickly without learning basic skill sets, and I think they need that regular catch up with a senior member of staff to be able to use them as a soundboard when things haven't gone right, when things have gone well, when they need feedback, when they need advice. And without one-to-ones and without those regular meetings and catch-ups, you never get an opportunity to be able to express yourself. And it may seem like a small thing, even if it's for 15 minutes once a week or once every couple of days, but the value that has to individuals within this industry is phenomenal. And I think, you know, you're talking about almost as exec and head chefs sort of stepping back from the past a little bit and looking at your staff as people and learning more about your role as a people manager rather than someone who can command a good service. And I think that's again, you mentioned about building people's resilience so that they're able to cope with stressful situations better. And also, you know, allowing them space and freedom to fail within their job role, but without being the one that sort of looking at them, ready to jump on them if they make a mistake, but being there to pick up the pieces and help them along. And I think those are brilliant points, really, really valuable points.
Yeah, I think, you know, something that we try and do as a team is just really getting to know your teams. And I think, again, that's a big challenge for pub companies because we have we've got nearly 1,000 employees. But if you can take the moment to find out what is motivating that individual, is it their family? Is it buying a car, getting a house? Is it taking time with their girlfriend? Is it going out with their mates? Whatever it is that's motivating them at that time is knowing what makes them tick. And I always find that anything we've been able to support people with, helping them with driving lessons or time off for a particular christening or whatever it is, those little things can go a long way and make people feel valued in their job. But also that changes as people, you know, hopefully people stay with you and their career progresses. So that's a really key point. I think actually knowing the personality of the people that you work with is massive because not one thing will fit for everybody. Yeah,
and there is no simple solution to this either, as you probably found. You know, you can't just say right, you just need a few less hours and you know, a regular catch up and that'll fix it, because that might be right for one person, but there's going to be a whole cascade of options. And that's where the frustration around this conversation comes around, is the business owners out there will be going, look, I know I'm losing staff to mental health, just give me a fix, just give me that one thing that will fix this situation. And there's no easy fix, but I think that, you know, Alice's points are from a wealth of experience and from, you know, first-hand experience of actually getting to some of the root causes within this industry that will actually help to improve and reduce those turnover rates and make sure that your staff are happier, healthier, and your customers are happy and want to spend more money as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there is any sort of business owners out there looking at this, you know, it's in many different books out there that have been published. The very first thing is look after team, because the rest of the business will follow. And that's, I really truly believe that if your team are happy, it follows through to ultimately profits.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you said it's obviously it's quite important to find out what motivates people. That's a great thing to have. But one of the questions, Chris, that you'd had that you wanted to speak to Alice about was an example of a limiting kind of belief that she's then managed to push through, and that you said that that's quite a running theme with chefs, that they believe they can only do so much. Is that what you mean, that they can only get to a certain point, and then what do they do if they can't get to that point? So setting limits. I know a lot of chefs that I talk to, I want my own restaurant by the time I'm 30, or I want to be head chef by this age. And then what does that affect? How does that affect your mental health if you get to that age and you're nowhere near that goal? Is that, I'm assuming that's kind of where you're getting at with that question.
Yes and no. I mean, so there's two sides to that question, really. So you brought on a new dynamic with regards to what happens if my aspirations are high and I don't fulfill my goals within the time frame that I expect. So that's one side of things. But the question from sort of the angle that I was looking at is, times in people's lives where actually you're employed as a CDP, or you're employed as a junior sous or as a commie, and you feel that that's the role you're in. So that's the role, within the hierarchy and the matrix, that's the role that you're going to then perform for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and that's all that you're capable of. So I think the question is probably for people who are in those positions currently, who go, I don't think that I'm capable of being a sous chef, or I don't think I'm capable of moving up the ranks. And I guess the question is, Alice, has there ever been a time where you thought, actually, I'm not capable of that, until there's been that manager or that senior member of staff or a friend who's pushed you through that wall?
Yes, wow, it's such a good question. It's interesting, because actually my initial gut feeling about is that people do rush their careers. Certainly in pub companies, we have encountered people that are sous chefs, but really should be chef de parties. They're not quite there yet, and they need some more learning. Sorry, I've got a lot of background noise behind me. Sorry. But yes, definitely, I've been very lucky in my current role, where I think, although I had been an executive chef before, the sort of rapid growth that I've had here, with the company growing so quickly, that does bring a bit of like, oh my God, this is massive, and this is a lot of chefs, a lot of businesses to look after. And I've been very lucky that our managing director, Jason, and our Jonathan, our CEO, have really pushed me and backed me to push particularly the mental health agenda and support me on that, and just try things and be allowed to make mistakes. And I think that's a really key point. If you can get yourself an employer and work with people that allow you to make some mistakes, and that's okay, then it hopefully gives you a bit of confidence to push through. And it's okay if you make those mistakes. You learn from it. Sometimes you need that to grow.
Well, yeah, that's. So someone asked me a question only yesterday, and they said, is stress bad? And I was like, well, it depends on how you manage stress, and also what sort of stress we're talking about. But I believe that stress should be divided up into two sections now. So you should have your stretch period and then your stressful period. So stress it's bad when it gets to critical levels, and it can lead to burnout, and it can lead to mental illness. But also at the same time, I think that it's, as you say, it's good to be able to make mistakes and feel stretched and grow yourself, and then enable you to learn more about yourself and more about your skill set and develop that. And I think that that's where perhaps senior managers and business owners should be looking at people going, well, actually, I know when to step in to be able to take the load off of this person, because it has become too demanding, both physically and mentally. But also at the same time, I know where there's that level of boundary, so that person is learning, but without detriment to their well-being. And I think, again, that goes back to what you're saying about knowing your staff, actively listening to them and understanding how they work as individuals, so that you know where those boundary points are.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think the whole sort of autonomy and an input into your role, and getting a say in how you want to work as well, I think is really key, so that it isn't just from the top down. That's important, and collaborative discussions about that, I think also maybe would help people feel more confident to thrive in their role and then take the next step up. I know we're going to touch on COVID, I'm sure, at some point, but during the lockdown, as a company, we spent quite a lot of time with our training and looking at a whole sort of what we're calling our learning paths, so that at any point when someone joins the company, they can see where they could potentially go. And I think that's really important for that point where you feel like you can't do more, is just to keep referring to that and saying, actually, you could, and this is what you need to achieve it. And I guess it's working with the right people to get you there. Or moving jobs if you don't feel you can, but certainly I would encourage people to speak up to their bosses and to their line managers and saying, I feel like I could do more. What can I do? What do I need to get there? Is there something I'm not getting quite right? I think as a personal level, you would just feel amazing for being that brave and saying it out loud, even if you didn't get what you wanted. So I would encourage that, definitely.
Good point.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned COVID, and Chris, you mentioned stress, and they're definitely two words that I've spent a lot of time discussing over the past few months. So how have coronavirus restrictions impacted your mental health personally, Alice, do you think, and or people that you work with? I know you've said obviously you focused on training, but I'd be interested to know yourself, your own kind of personal impact that it's had, because it's affected everybody in very different ways, hasn't it?
It has, and I was talking about this with someone the other day, saying how people, it has affected everybody in any sort of all different ways. For me, I didn't go on furlough. I worked all the way through with our managing director, because we saw an opportunity really to try and relaunch the business, try and protect as many people as we could, and made sure we came out of it strong, and made improvements to our business. I tried to look at it as positive as possible. I would say I spent the whole time with anxiety, quite honestly. From my point of view, I was anxious about everybody, what was going to happen. I think myself and Jason feel, very strongly about our teams, and want to make sure they're okay. So anxious, definitely, and quite stressed. But actually, as we started to come out of it and we had a plan, and we sort of staggered our reopenings, we also had the benefit of reopening in the Channel Islands sooner than the UK, because they came out of lockdown sooner than the UK. So we had a benefit of doing it in 3 stages. So I think that was the benefit of everybody, that we had a really tight reopening plan that was successfully launched. So I think the guys did really well. I think everyone was exhausted after Eat Out to Help Out. I mean, truly exhausted. And I think, that was mad, truly mad. And we just had a month of 7-day weekends, essentially, which caught us all on the hop. And I think we would all agree that we were sort of quite pleased to see the end of it, because I could tell that everyone was exhausted, but they handled it brilliantly. And they did it with real, I was so proud of our chefs. They handled it with such pride, and they just got stuck in, and they were all really happy to be back at work as well, which is great. So I think generally okay, pretty good, but certainly the stress levels were through the max, and it was a difficult time. Some people obviously came back and thought, actually, this isn't for me. I've had such a lovely time at home, spending time with my family, that I'm going to take a step back, or I'm going to do something else, which was completely fine, of course. But the majority of our chefs, in particular, were really pleased to come back to work, and were really driven to go and smash it, and do their best and cook some great food. So generally okay, but very stressful, and certainly my experience was just anxiety the whole time.
Yeah. Is that, Chris, is that kind of what you've talking to people in industry, is that kind of, we've had stress, anxiety, exhaustion, like, is that kind of a overriding feeling?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the whole thing with COVID, and certainly what's happening with hospitality at the moment, is an absolute, it's a travesty and a farce, bearing in mind the infection rates within the hospitality are the lowest in many other industries. It's or compared to many other industries, it's crazy. And I think that in itself has actually probably increased the levels of stress and anxiety that are happening for business owners and for staff elsewhere. I mean, the second that you strip out any degree of financial security or job security from people's lives, you're opening yourself up to a hotbed of issues and high stress levels. So that has its own complications, and unfortunately there isn't a great deal that business owners can do to mitigate that, because they're fighting for survival themselves. But I think, just implementing some of the tips that Alice has mentioned today, and just getting to know your team a little bit more, and the fact that we are all in this together as a hospitality industry, although I do appreciate there are some areas that are in quite strict lockdowns. When we did a survey back in June over COVID, and one thing that came out of that was that only 24% of employees had actually received any sort of well-being resources or assistance in terms of where to look, even to try and manage their own well-being over COVID. Now, I appreciate that was over lockdown, but 60% of those people ended up going and, 60% of the people who didn't receive resources, which is a fair old whack, went and tried to find their own. So I think if employers are looking at how they can add some added benefit to their staff at this moment in time, it's, go onto the Burnt Chef website. I mean, I know that Butcombe, they took the wellbeing and check-in pack that we designed in order to check in with their staff. Download that. It's a free resource, and just start checking in with your staff and find out how they are. I think it's important to be able to level with them at this time and say to them that, the time is difficult and it is stressful, but I think the better a connection that you build with those people at this moment in time, the better it'll be for them, or the more it will alleviate these stressful conditions.
Yeah, the self-care playbook is absolutely awesome. I mean, it's so useful, and I know that our teams took loads from it, because I think it actually just speaks to people on a real sort of basic level, with the right possible term, is that it's not too complicated, it's very accessible. There's some really good tips in there, and I think no matter what sort of person you are or what you need to find that works for you, and that might be more time with your family, or it might be walking outside for 5 minutes to get some fresh air and just take some deep breaths and compose yourself, whatever it is that you need, going to bed earlier. Certainly for me, it's charging my work phone in another room, because that forces me to then not look at it until sort of 8-9 o'clock in the morning sometimes, which really helps me. So there's loads of tips in there, so I would echo that. It's been really useful to our teams for sure. I know you can download that on your website, Chris, that playbook.
Yeah, under help and resources, it's available there for free. So jump on, grab it. Please take advantage of that.
Alice, we had a question that was sent in, and it was if you could give some advice to yourself at the start of your career on how to safeguard your all-round health whilst working in hospitality, what would it be?
Wow. I think, knowing myself, I would never have stopped getting full into work, I've got to be honest, because I just love it. And I love working with the people I do. I love food and drink. So my passion would have made sure that I always worked a lot of hours. So I don't think I would have convinced myself that. But I think probably, as I said, speaking up. And I think the common theme, I think, with women as well in hospitality is fear. And that holds you back, lack of confidence. So I probably would have told myself to not be so fearful and allow yourself to make some mistakes. That in itself would have made me feel like I've accomplished something, which always gives me a massive high. It makes me feel like I've really achieved something, and I'm always jumping around when I do that. So I think that would have helped. And then probably just taking more time for just me. And just stop rushing around for a lot of different reasons. Whatever that is that you're into, that little small moment, even if it's half an hour a day, 15 minutes a day, just that one moment just for you, I think it makes you just feel really good about yourself. So, that's what I would have told myself.
Brilliant. And a question that's just come in whilst we're live, does your company provide an EAP for the staff? And if so, have you any idea if it's used much?
Yes, we do. We do have an employee assistance program, and I think it's available to our employees, partners and families as well. And I think it has been used quite a lot. for all sorts of things, financial advice, just someone to talk to. I think particularly around COVID time and coming out of lockdown as well. We know it's been used. So so far it's been a real success, and yeah, we probably brought it in now about a year ago, and it's going really well. So such a good thing to do, and I like that it's confidential as well. And we don't obviously see any of the data or anything like that, but from what I can tell, but people have been mentioning it, that they have used it, and it's been well received.
I think just on that point, Alice, is something that any business owners or head chefs or managers, general managers out there perhaps wondering how they start a conversation with their staff about their own mental health or well-being, is that there's a poster that you can put on the wall. It's a very, very simple poster. You can design it yourself. It's a piece of paper on the wall with different grids on there. And those grids will be broken down into, I'm feeling great, I'm feeling okay, I'm not great today, or I'm really in the weeds and I'm struggling. And when your staff get in the morning, if they just check in and put a tally, just a single line against where they are feeling on that particular day, it means that management teams and other members of staff can check that and find out who, or just someone in their brigade, is perhaps not feeling very well today. They're feeling resilient, or they're feeling highly stressed. And that enables people just to be mindful of their approach during service, or be it busy times, and actually tailor and soften their approach so that they can cater for those people. So I think, for that sort of thing, it's a really useful technique for anyone that might be struggling on how to start these conversations.
Chris, is that something that people have fed back to you that works, that their team really engage with, that they will be honest and they will put that mark where it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get those. I mean, to be fair, the stigma and shame within mental health, let alone just this industry, is so strong that there are going to be those people, even though it's completely anonymous, who may not feel comfortable with putting down the real state of their mental health. But to be honest with you, if you've got a brigade of 10 or 15, and this includes front of house, this includes all members of staff within the business, I think even if you can identify one or two people who will happily anonymously say that they're not feeling 100% in terms of their mental well-being, it means then that as a business owner or as a manager, that you've got to specifically look at how you're handling and how you're speaking to people, and perhaps bringing in regular one-to-ones and actively listening to your staff are ways of mitigating those feelings.
Yeah. Okay. And final question for me is, Alice, why do you think talking about mental health helps other people? Why does it help so much to talk?
I think if you look at some of the progress we've made, all that maybe it's small in the whole scheme of things, and since the Burnt Chef project has been around, it just shows you that everyone has been through it, everyone has experienced it, everyone wants it to change, and that involves everybody being involved in that. Not just employees, but people themselves. I think, I actually think that a lot of chefs I've worked with in the past are terrible at managing their own time, terrible at taking responsibility for their own self-care. And it's a joint effort from everybody to change that perception and that stigma. And we can't do that unless we talk about it all the time. And certainly at our work, and I would encourage everybody, it's all the posters, it's talking about it. We've got a menu donation on our menus that has a little blurb about the Burnt Chef project on it, so that our customers can read it, our staff can read it. We're proud to talk about it, and we're not going to push it under the carpet. It's a real issue, and so it's just the repetition of talking about it. And I think that culturally that spreads. And it becomes a thing, it becomes the norm over time. That will affect real change. That's why talking about it is so important. And the more people that hear about it, that's the bit for me, is it won't change until everybody's talking about it, and then we recognise that it's an issue that needs to change.
Chris, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, without me going off into a rant, and Alice, the mental health awareness course that I've been building is ready, so we can roll that out to your teams as soon as it is. But one part of that is, historically, the stigma and the shame that's attached to mental health means that the whole reason why that's such a taboo subject is because no one does speak about it. Terms get bandied around in the media like crazy and lunatic and all these sort of things. And you know, it's such a fearful and shameful subject when it doesn't need to be. And I think that Alice is right. The more people talk about it, and certainly the more that general public are perhaps a little bit more aware of how tough and demanding hospitality is, then the more members of staff will start to feel more comfortable about discussing their own mental health and well-being. And you know, a big issue within this trade, and it's something that I'm sure we'll touch upon as part of this series, is presenteeism, which is where you've actually got people who are not well enough to be at work, but do it because they feel they have to, because they owe the customer and they owe the business, which actually is really, really impacting this trade. And it's very, very difficult to measure, but there have been some studies that I've come across recently that are incredibly insightful into that. So I think that by, again, taking a zero tolerance approach, starting to talk about it more, normalizing the conversation, it allows people to feel a little bit more comfortable. And, you know, it does mean that then if you are feeling highly anxious, or if you're having panic attacks, you know, before service, then being in work is not great for your well-being, and is ultimately going to impact not just you, but others around you as well. And everyone wants you to be better, and to be able to discuss this more openly is key. This catalyst.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think, again, culturally, I'll use that word. I think your team will stick with you and look after you, and they'll look after each other when it is an open forum and people feel safe to talk. And that, again, is a wonderful thing, the tightness. And the wonderful thing about hospitality, which often we forget because everything's a bit doom and gloom sometimes, is the team bond is amazing. And when people feel like they can talk and that they're in a safe environment, that's a great thing. And actually being a chef is a great thing. It's a creative, it's a cool place, it's a cool job to do, it really is. And I just want to get back to concentrating on that, and it being a fantastic career for someone to get into, rather than what we've created over the last 20 years, which is just awful. So again, I think if we talk about it, keep going with it, that's how we'll affect change.
Definitely. And I think that is a perfect place for us to end this. Obviously, Alice, you work with the Burnt Chef Project, and thank you very much for joining us on this very first one. And Chris, if people want to get involved in the Burnt Chef Project, they can find you on the website. They can contact you there if they want any more details, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Also, we're very active on social media, both Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So, you know, reach out, drop us a message. It may take some time to respond, so you know, just bear with us. It's a busy service every day at the Burnt Chef Project, but yeah, do reach out and you know, get in contact.
Brilliant. So next Wednesday at 4:45 again, you get to see me and Chris. Lucky you. And we'll be joined with them by Adam Simmons, who is he's keen to talk about the impact of mental health that it has on a business, and the benefits of looking after your staff, alongside some other topics as well, but that's kind of his main focus. So please join us again then, and thank you again, Alice, for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.